Hey designers. So for this lecture, we're going to talk a little bit more about view types. So you've already been exposed to a couple types of views, plans and exterior elevations, and we even went into 3D views a little bit in Revit. So you've seen all those, but there are lots of other types of views that we use to put together a set of plans. And you may be familiar with some of them and you may not be familiar with some of them. So I'm just going to go through them a little bit in theory and tell you a little bit about what they do. So in Revit specifically, the types of views you can create are plans, which you've seen, reflected ceiling plans, which you also saw. Those are the ceiling plans. It's just a plan view, but looking up instead of down. There's exterior elevations, which you've been exposed to. Those are just looking straight at the front of the building or the side of the building or the back of the building, just exterior looking right at the building. Then there's interior elevations, which we haven't talked about yet. And this is an interior designer's best friend. But basically they're the same thing as an exterior elevation, but on the inside of the building. And so we'll look at some of those. Then sections, those we use a lot to kind of help see how the building is put together and show the relationship between different rooms and structural items and walls and floors and all that. Then there are details, and those can come in the same. Basically, a detail is just really zoomed in to look at usually an assembly, how you're going to assemble certain parts of the building, zoomed in really close to show the different layers and materials. And they can be details of a section, they can be details of a plan, of a reflected ceiling plan, or even, a detail of an exterior element. So all these other views can all be details. Detail just describes the views we've already talked about, but in closer, like zoomed in and with more information on it. Then there are 3D orthographic views, which is what you're used to seeing. So far, that's all we've been using is the orthographic view, 3D views. And then there's 3D perspective. So the difference between the two is simply a 3D perspective is how things would look to your eyes if you were standing inside the model. Meaning, if you've ever looked at things in 3D, when you look or draw, so for example, the edges of a building, as you look up, they kind of expand. Even though in real life, the two sides of the building are parallel and should run straight, when you look at them in a perspective with your own eyes, they tend to diverge. Well, they go the opposite way. If you look up a skyscraper, they tend to come together rather than stay parallel. Whereas the orthographic views, parallel lines always look parallel. So I'll show you that in a second. So let's just jump into some examples and I will show you. So in Revit, I'm going to try to show you all these views, but with a residential context versus a commercial context, because they're very different. So let's just look real quickly. Let's just look at a set of drawings. Okay, well, first, let's talk about 3D views while we're here. So you can see this is an orthographic 3D view. When I zoom in, do you see how no matter what way I change the model, the edges are parallel? So this is going straight up and down. This is going straight up and down. The edges that are normally parallel to each other they stay parallel. Whereas if I go into a 3D perspective, it is not like that. So let's look. Let's go to this view. This is a 3D perspective. Let's go outside and look at the building from the outside. Okay, so now if we look at this building as if we were there in the model from a perspective view, this line and this line are not parallel. If you continued these out, they would eventually start to cross paths. And those are a different angle, and that's a different angle. So it's really meant to simulate how you would perceive it if you were there in person. And it gives a more realistic feeling to the view. Okay, so now let's get back to our residential set. So we've got a site plan, which is simply a plan view in Revit. Then there's a foundation plan, a basement plan, and a main floor plan, right? You get the idea. There's basically a floor plan for every level. And in residential, what you'll often find is on one single plan, they have the dimensions, and then you have the room labels, you have detail callouts, you have notes that are calling things out. On here, we have the room labels, and then you even have like the finishes. These are labeling all the finishes. So everything's mixed into the same floor plan. If I move over to my commercial project, which is a junior high school, you'll see, you'll see a couple things. So if I go back to my floor plan, you'll also notice the whole floor plan fits on one sheet. If you go to the high school or the junior high, it's so big, the floor plan, that it doesn't fit on one sheet. So just for the floor plans, let's see. You can see here are the floor plans. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 14 sheets just for the floor plans because it's divided up into areas. So let's just look at area A. So this is the floor plan, but it's just of one small part of the school because that's all we could fit on one sheet. So you can see it's cut off. Let me draw. Right here it's cut off, and right here is cut off. The building continues this way. This is the cafeteria, and this is the commons room. It continues this way and then over this way. Whoops. So it continues on for quite a bit. So that's the first difference about a commercial, is they're just much bigger. The other thing is, you'll notice in this floor plan, it's missing dimensions. On some commercial projects, in order to keep the sheets from getting too cluttered, we separate the dimension plans from the floor plans. So there is a whole separate set of sheets that just have dimensions on them. And then we do all the other annotations on the floor plans. So you can see there's wall tags, door tags, window tags. See, in residential, you don't typically tag the walls either. But in commercial, there's so many different types of wall assemblies that every single wall gets tagged, and you tell the builder exactly what is in that wall. Whereas residential, it's typically a 2x4 or a 2x6 with gypboard on either side. And maybe on the exterior, there's some brick or stucco, but it's not near as complicated as commercial, where on the inside we have, CMU block, but then we have metal studs with gypboard. Sometimes we have wood studs with gypboard. And then sometimes we have rated walls that have to be fire walls, and they have to have a fire assembly on them. So it can get really complicated depending on what you're doing. So those are plan views. Let's look at reflected ceiling plans a little bit. So reflected ceiling plans are sometimes called RCPs. And these don't happen a lot in residential. Mostly these happen in commercial construction. And so you can see here where I'm looking at the same area, area A, and you can see the point is to call out all the different ceiling types and what material is on the ceiling. And if there's soffits, dropped soffits, or different shapes or things we want to do with the ceilings, we call those out. Whereas in residential, you usually don't have reflected ceiling plans unless it's high-end residential. So my house does not have reflected ceiling plans. I did do some select area reflected ceiling plans. So if I go to this last sheet, or one of the last sheets, there are some areas where I bothered to draw the ceiling, but for the most part in residential, you just put the ceiling on the bottom of the truss or the bottom of the floor joist, and there's not a whole lot to describe. So unless it's high-end residential or there's special details you want to do, we don't do reflected ceiling plans that often in residential. All right, so now the next thing we could look at is the exterior elevations. Again, one of the main differences between commercial and residential is just the sheer size of things. So the front elevation is easily fits on one sheet on a residential house typically, but on the commercial project, it's a much bigger deal. And so there are a lot of exterior elevation sheets. So the full front of the building most likely doesn't fit on one sheet, so you have to break that view up into many views. So let's take a look at this. So you can see we're trying to get the front of the building, and it had to be broken up into 3 separate views, which they all have an attachment line that lines up. And you just you would hook them together like this in order to create the full front of the building. All right, so you're mostly familiar with those types of views, but the next type of view would be a section view. So let's just look at a plan view. So to kind of see what a section view is doing, let's jump back into the residential project and we'll take a look at the floor plan. So if you've never seen a section, basically it's just cutting a building in half. You're trying to cut the building open so that you can see the different parts of the building. So that a section looks like this, a section tag looks like this. And it's to help the person understand where the building is being cut. So let's just take this for example. This section right here, it's going to cut through the entry and the kitchen and the dining room and the living room. So if we click on this to open that view, you'll see, okay, here's me cutting the building open, and here's the entry, kitchen, dining, and living room. And what you can discover from these are the relationships of a lot of things. So here we can see, okay, the entry is right over utility storage, or the kitchen is right over the project room. Okay, so you can kind of see where things are in relation to each other. You can also see the ceiling height is clearly getting taller as you go towards the back of the house. You can also see that the main floor is level until you get to the living room, then it drops down. So the point of a section is to help the builder understand how the building is being put together, things that are harder to see in a floor plan and that you wouldn't see from an exterior elevation, you can see in a section. And then of course, this is just a residential version. Let me open up a commercial section and you can see there's way, way more detail in a commercial project. In residential, you're just trying to show relationships, maybe where some insulation goes, where the ground is, where the roof is. In commercial, there's a lot more, so let me show you that. So let's move over to a building section sheet for the junior high. And you'll see there's just a lot more of them. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sheets of these, and on each sheet there's probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 times 5, there could be 30 different sections through this building. And then as you look at the sections, it's showing you all the floor assemblies and all the masonry. So there's more detail. And then on top of that, we do section details. So almost all of the exterior walls have a section showing how they connect and how they're assembled. So if I click on this, you can see all of those details. So we call those wall sections, and let's just go to one of those sheets and I can show you what those look like. These again may exist to some extent in some residential, but not usually is there all of this detail. So it's showing all of the different pieces. And then even in the section detail, there are other details calling out even more information. So if I click on this, it will bring us even closer and tell us exactly how all of this is made. So you can see how commercial is just exponentially crazier with information. Okay, the last view type I think is the most important for us because this course is centered around interior design. So what you want to see now is basically interior elevations. So let's go first to a residential project. A lot of the times a residential project won't have any interior elevations. The only time probably residential has it is if they've hired an interior designer to design the inside. Otherwise, there's typically not interior elevations. So on my house, I did do my own interior design, and so I created my own interior design sheets. So let's just look at a furnishings plan. So again, this is another kind of floor plan, but the concentration here is not to show dimensions. It's not to tag all the windows and doors, but rather it's to try to show the furniture layout and to communicate finishes. So you'll see in these floor plans, you can see all the floor patterns, and there's all of these callouts here. So this is what an interior elevation callout tag looks like. So what it's trying to do is it's telling you what sheet you need to go to, and then the arrow points to which wall is being elevated. So this arrow is pointing to this wall. So this is the shower in the master bathroom. And it's saying if you go to sheet ID 809 and look at view 3, you'll see this wall as if you're looking at it straight on. So let's just do that. Let's click on that. Let's double click that. And now you can see this is what the shower looks like. So now you can see the tile, you can see the glass, you can see the shower heads, the controls, the towel bars, and you can dimension everything. So let's just look at sheet ID 809 to kind of get a better idea of what you're trying to do. So here's the bathroom. There's usually an enlarged floor plan as part of the interior design. So there's the furnishings plan, and then each room gets its own enlarged plan. And then inside the enlarged plan, you can see all of the interior elevation. You can see the marker to tell you where to look. So now you can see it's as if you're standing and looking at the vanity and then turning around in the room. So this view is right here. Then if you turn from looking this direction and you look this direction, then you would see you're looking at this wall. And then if you turn again from there to look at this wall, that's what you would see here. And then if you turn this way and look out towards the windows, this is what you'd see. So the point of interior elevations is to describe all of the interior materials and dimension anything that needs dimensionings. The cabinets, we call out the different sizes of cabinets, and we dimension the light fixtures, we dimension plumbing fixtures, and then that corresponds with the floor plans or the furnishings plans where we call out all of the other furnishes like the baseboard, the paint color, the floor finish, the ceiling finish, the wall finish. There's all sorts of things that we call out here. So that would be what this would be if you did an interior design package for a residential project. And interior design requires a lot of sheets because you're trying to describe every surface inside of a building. So you can see my main set of architectural plans. is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, like 18 sheets. And the interior design is 23 sheets. So there is more interior design sheets than architectural sheets. And if we switch over and look at this commercial project, let me just go to the title sheet, the cover page, and we can look at the sheet index and you can see how many interior elevations there are. Okay, so here's an index of all of the sheets inside this set. And under the architectural, you can see there's lots of architectural sheets, but the interior design sheets start at the furnishings plans. So starting here and going this way, these are all done by the interior designer. And then that's just one column. And then all the way over here, all of this is done by the interior designer. So if I just scoot back a little, and if you think about this is all of the stuff that's handled by the architect. And inside the architectural firm, there's the entire interior designer, and she, or he, but in this case it was a she, is handling this many sheets. You can see how much information an interior designer that's on a commercial project is actually responsible for. So let me just show you really quickly commercial projects, interior elevations. Okay, so here are the furnishing plans. Let's look at one furnishing plan just so that you can see an example. So here again is area A, and now you can see here are all the floor patterns. And so we usually try to be decorative with the floors, and so our interior designer is trying to show, okay, there's a border around the edge, and then in front of the classrooms there's a different kind of layout, different color, and then she's also showing all the different transitions between the different floor materials. And then inside the room, she's calling out the floor, the base, the wall colors, and then the signage that goes on the walls. So there's a lot to do. We call out all of the drapes or shades on all of the windows. We call out all the whiteboards, marker boards, TVs. All of the cabinets and millwork that go in each classroom need to be called out. So it's a lot of stuff that we're calling out. Then to go further, let's look at an interior elevation.